Coming up on UGTV. A special session of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas.
Being here this evening. Tonight, we're going to look at the results of the community survey findings. And with that, I'll turn it over to Administrator Bach. Doug?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Every 2 years, or for the last few cycles, since 2014, 16, 18, now this year, we have gone out for a survey in our community. So it's given us some comparison to look back. We add some new questions each time, but many of the questions we put in the community survey are the same, so we can kind of have a baseline to look at. And tonight, we are ready to make that report. Mike Grimm with our research department leads up this effort for us, and I will turn it over to Mike and let him take us from there. Mike?
Thanks, Doug. Commissioners, this is...
Push your button.
There we go.
Okay, now we're set. Mr. Bach, Commissioners, we have Chris Tatham with us tonight. He's with ETC, and him and his team do great work, and we're thankful to work with him again this go around. But with that, I'll just turn it over, and he'll go through the results of the 2020 survey.
Well, it's great to be back with you. I think this is probably around the 20th survey I've done for the Unified Government / Wyandotte County / Kansas City, Kansas over the last 20-some years. Our firm has actually surveyed, I think it's approaching 200,000 people in the Kansas City area. Maybe more. If you're not familiar with us, we're down in Olathe. We now have offices in several places across the country. I just came back from India, where we actually have an office of 11 people, and we're doing work on 4 continents now. So we're trying to take our tools and take them to other countries to help them use input from their communities to make better decisions. This map is just kind of the gee whiz of dots of where we're at. We passed 2.5 million people surveyed sometime last year. That's getting to be more and more like McDonald's, where it's billions served. That's at least what I hope one of these days. But we do have tremendous databases, and that's one of the reasons we have an office in India and so many programming folks is we're developing data analytics that can take all the data from all of our clients, the millions of pieces of information, and give local governments the ability to interpret that better. So as we go through the results tonight, I'll make some kind of comparative comments, certainly some historical comments. If you have questions as we go through, since there's 416 slides, feel free to just stop me as I'm kidding. So if I see any people who are listening, it's not that long, but I think this is a work session, so feel free just to ask me as we go so you don't have to remember to the end. But I have been doing this a long time, and frankly, the Unified Government was actually one of the very first communities we did our Direction Finder survey. In fact, you were, I think, the 8th, and we've now done it in nearly 1,000 places around the world. So tonight I'm just going to walk you through, if you're new to this, I think you know the general purpose. You're the ones who commissioned it, but I'll walk you through why you did it. I'll give you some of the highlights of the findings. I used to be in the military, and my battalion commander used to always say, I want the 3 Bs. And it was like, what does that mean? And he would be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. So I'll give you that up front, and then I'll walk you through it, but at least if you pay attention to about slide 6, you'll know what the final slide is if your mind wanders. And like I said, this is a work session, so feel free to just ask me as we go. I think most of you understand that the purpose of this is to give you objective feedback from what the typical resident thinks. You actually do the survey at a level that allows you not only to look at it for the county, but you can look at it your districts and even your neighborhoods, and really to be commended for doing that. Most folks oftentimes stop just at the overall level, so there's tremendous data here. And the reason that's important is we did a survey 2 years ago, and we asked people around the country whether or not they had been to a public meeting. And a whopping 6.7% of people said, yes, I've attended a public meeting in the last year. We then had a follow-up question that said, well, was it really in the last year? And about half of them said, no, it was really more than 12 months ago. We then asked people why they went. The number one reason people went was to see someone get rewarded or recognized or get it themselves. Number two, they didn't like what you were doing. Number three, they wanted to change things. The average person doesn't come to public meetings, and these are very, very important places to hear the ends of the spectrum, but without a tool like this, sometimes you don't know how you're really doing. What does the average person on the street think about public safety services and streets? And so this tool isn't a decision-making tool for you. It just adds to your repertoire of things to help you make decisions. But certainly, I hope this information will help you tonight. You've now done it enough times that you have trend information, and the good news is you're moving in the right direction, and I'll highlight that tonight. As far as the sample, you'll notice that the goal was 2,400 surveys. I'll start right here, and you're like, wow, we got 4,313. We did the survey over the holidays for the first time. We normally do it later in the year. And I panicked because I thought we weren't going to get it done because the response rate had been so low. So we did a second mailing to another 10,000 households as we got to just after the Christmas period. We found out later the post office had been holding thousands of people's pieces of mail for us, so they suddenly delivered them after. So you were the beneficiary of the U.S. Postal's delayed return of mail to us. So that's why the response rate was what we had planned. We just which is just under 20%, but we sent it out to a lot more households than normal. So anyway, you can thank the U.S. Post Office, and we'll absorb the extra cost and give you all the data. What that means is your data this year, super, super accurate. I mean, a lot of your neighborhoods now have 70 to 100 respondents or more. A couple of your districts have well over 500 respondents. So this isn't just good data at the county level. Overall, it's accurate within plus or minus 1.5%. So this year, changes of 2% or more are statistically significant.
So what is the margin of error for the districts and neighborhoods, or is that in here somewhere?
Yeah, it'll depend. At 300, it's plus or minus 6. It depends on how many respondents, and I don't know if we laid it out for every commission district, but we can give that to you, but it's at least plus or minus 6. If you have 400, it's plus or minus 5. And then at 600, it's plus or minus 4. I'm happy to give that to you, but we made sure that we had at least 300 per district. But overall, this is what the distribution looks like, and you'll see that we had a little bit more response from some districts than others. So what I've done, and I do this every time we do the survey, is I've weighted it so that way each district counts equally. So that way, if one district has, for example, District 7 had 15.5% of the respondents, and another district like District 4 just had 9.6, at the end of the day, everyone's weighted equally. So you don't have to look and say, well, my district got a bigger input for the overall results. I actually do an adjustment. But the reason I keep all the records is that way if your district did have a very high response rate, you have more surveys. And so we made sure everyone got a minimum of 300, but some districts did get more than others just because the response rate was higher, but we did more follow-up in the districts where the response rate was not as high. But all in all, best response rate ever as far as the number of completed surveys, and you got substantially more value because of the post office made me nervous at the holidays, and I want to make sure you got the data in time. So with that said, this is the slide that probably, or the next couple slides kind of give you some highlights of what we found, and we broke down the survey into kind of your overall neighborhood services or your kind of city level services. We then talk about your county level services, and then we break it into specific areas like infrastructure maintenance, public safety, and then within each of those sets, we identify kind of what the priorities are based on the ratings that people give and also how important they think the different services are. So I'll start with your neighborhood and community services. And you'll know in this slide, you really see city-like services. You'll see fire services at the top, ambulance service, public safety services, all rate very well. You'll see your police services there. You work your way down, you'll see things like trash collection, parks and recreation, sewers and utilities. And if you keep on going down, you'll then see down at the bottom, you'll see maintenance of city streets. When you look at these charts, you'll see colors of blue, kind of a gray or a neutral, and then the red. The red indicates negative responses. In this case, it's dissatisfied. The blue is positive responses, which means people have had a positive experience. We label it neutral, but that really is someone saying it's okay. In other words, people give a rating on a 5-point scale. They don't say, I'm neutral. They say, I give it a 3, if that makes sense to you. If someone doesn't know, they say, I don't know, and we actually exclude those. So what you'll notice here is that some of the services people have an opinion about, but chances are they either haven't had a lot of interaction or what they have had has just been what they expect. And that's where you see things like municipal court at 46% giving a neutral rating. That means people at least know what it is, but they probably haven't had a real good or a real bad experience. On the other hand, if you get things like public safety services, fire, ambulance, and police services, people feel really good about that, and they're giving very positive ratings. There's very little dissatisfaction at all. In fact, if you look at your fire services, only 3% of people gave negative rating. And so sometimes people say there's at least 5 to 10% cranky people out there. That's not true here in Wyandotte County, because only 3% gave a negative rating. On the other hand, though, you come down to some of the other issues like maintenance of streets, you'll see over 4 out of 10 people gave negative ratings. Code enforcement, 1 in 3. And so those are areas that are of greater concern. And I typically am looking for things, if there's more than 1 out of 4 people giving a negative rating, that in and of itself just causes me to say there's probably some things that you can do better in that area. But how you do, though, isn't in itself the importance factor decision. It's also how important the services are. And I'm going to share that with you in just a little bit. When we look at the trends, this is really the great news. Of the 14 major categories of neighborhood or city services that are assessed, we've seen improvements in 13 of the 14 since 2016. So you're definitely moving in the right direction. You'll notice the only one that we've actually seen a decrease is your trash collection and recycling. So I guess that's not news to you. So, and that actually, most of that actually occurred between 2016 and 18, because you'll notice it actually only went down 1% from the last survey. So most of that was when I presented last time. On the other hand, if you look at the other items, fire services, parks and recreation, sewer utilities, parks and recreation, facilities and programs, your stormwater runoff, communication with the public, code enforcement, and planning have all gone up significantly, which is 2% or more since the last survey. So you're definitely doing things. There's a lot of opportunity to do better, when you look here, but you're definitely moving the community in the right direction. So that's the real good news that we found in this year's survey. The other thing I want to share with you has to do with what the priorities are for improvement. And you might not be surprised that given that 41% are dissatisfied with street maintenance, it's at the top of the list, and that's what you see here. It's not a surprise that police services are next. That's usually at the top of the list if street maintenance is not a concern. That's something that people just tend to prioritize. Really rapid growth communities, it tends to be things like traffic flow. But your ranking for streets, public safety service, and even communication and code enforcement aren't that unusual if I look at comparable communities. But you will see that just how important getting information out to people is. And one of the things that's happened over the last few years is as newspapers have declined, people are starting to seek it from other sources. And so even social media these days is becoming a dominant source in a lot of communities for information. So being able to control what's going out from the community is important, because usually the local government, if you're getting ratings like you get, tends to be a fairly trusted source of information, even more so than all the secondary social media sites that are out there. So that's one of the reasons you see that people do emphasize that a lot. But you will notice that maintenance of street had more people pick it as a first choice than it did for police combined first and second choices. More people picked maintenance of streets as a first or second choice more than the top 4 combined for any other neighborhood services. So it's definitely something people care about. Unfortunately, it's really expensive. That's the other side of this. And so part of it is decide what you can do with limited resources. And that's where things like code enforcement, trash, and some of these other services, you may be able to have a positive impact for less money, if that makes sense to you. It doesn't mean you don't do streets, it's really important, but given limited resources, you may be able to show the community significant improvement by addressing some of the second, third, and fourth most important topics. I broke this out for you by commission district, just so you could kind of see how things stack up. And you actually are getting, if you haven't already, a separate report that shows the detail. Though your reports actually even have your own district with your own maps, and you also have the analysis for your district for these different areas. So for today, I'm mainly focusing on the overall, but you will notice that maintenance of streets is the top issue when it comes to local neighborhood services in all 8 districts. Communications actually second most important in District 1, but you'll see in every other place it's police services, and police services are third in District 1. So you see those 2 services are really at the top across the board. Code enforcement you see is 4th overall, and you can see it's either in 3rd or 4th place. And you'll see communication with the public really varies, but it's still in the top 5 in all of the areas that we looked at. So of the 14 services, the top 5 are pretty consistent in all 5 districts, and maintenance of streets and police are really a solid number 1 and 2 in almost all of them. So when we did some analysis, we then take the importance ratings that you see here, plus the satisfaction ratings that I was showing you earlier, and we put it together to help you identify, well, where would be the best place to emphasize your messages for communication and your dollars? And it's really both. What this just shows you about is these are the issues for you to own in the community's perspective. Doesn't mean you have to fix them all, but if the community doesn't think you have plans to address them, that can hurt your long-term credibility and your ability to meet their expectations regarding satisfaction. And you'll see that maintenance for streets is at the very top. It's actually the most important with the lowest rating. Number 2 you see is code enforcement, and number 3 is communication. Those are things that I think you should really keep front and center moving forward. The other items you see, stormwater, public transportation, trash collection, police services, planning and zoning, and parks and recreation, you should all continue to take a look at those and pay attention to them. But the one that perhaps affords some of the most opportunity, at least per dollar, in some ways could be your code enforcement and communication when you're looking at what these things cost and giving the potential impact that they have on your overall satisfaction rating. Yeah, and this is, I tend to be a left brain person, so this is the way I think. I like to have first, second, third, fourth, but I've done this for over 2 decades, and I know some people like visuals. So if you're like, man, that's just numbers and I don't like it, this next chart's for you, and there's a lot more like this in the report too. Though tonight I'm gonna spend most of my time on these types of charts. This is the same information I just shared with you. It's just graphs so that as you go from left to right, the things on the right side are the more important than the ones on the left, and as you go from the bottom to the top, the things on the bottom are the lower ratings, and the things at the above get the higher ratings. And this is where you'll see communication. Street maintenance is way over in the bottom right quadrant, which is really where your top opportunities for improvement are. You'll see code enforcement and communication there. And you notice police is in the top right quadrant. That means you need to keep doing it well. It's something that people value a lot, but your overall ratings are pretty good for police. They can be better, but you're moving in the right direction. So this just gives you a general sense for among your neighborhood services, what should your overall priorities be? And then as each of you are looking at the interests of your districts, hope you'll see that a lot of them are actually aligned, at least when it comes to some of the top priorities. And you'll be able to see this type of analysis specifically for each of your districts in your individual reports. In addition, you'll have a number of maps. For today, I just have the district level maps because when you get down to the neighborhoods, it gets really busy, but you have your own neighborhood maps. And I guess what I want to emphasize here is for the items that are the highest opportunities or have the greatest opportunity for improvement, they tend to be rated very similarly throughout the county. For example, what you see here isn't just a yellow map of the county. It's actually all of the districts are shaded the same color, which is what we've done is if you look at the scale at the bottom right, it shows if the average person was very satisfied, you'd see the district in dark blue. If the average person was very dissatisfied, it would be red. In this case, regardless of where you are in the county, people are perceiving the condition of their streets at about the same level. That's actually good. It suggests that you've done a pretty equitable job of distributing limited resources to take care of streets. People want the streets to be better, but you aren't neglecting, at least at a district level, one district compared to another. When you look at your individual district maps, though, that's where you'll start to see some of the differences. But as a group, you've actually done a pretty good job of making sure district by district you're providing similar levels of service given the expectation that your residents have. The same is true for code enforcement. Again, not a yellow map. It just shows that regardless of where people live, their perceptions of code enforcement are very similar. You'll see the variation, though, once again, within your districts. Communication, same thing. In this case, generally better ratings across the county, but all the districts feel pretty much the same about the quality of communication. Stormwater, interestingly, almost all of the counties the same, except one district's a little bit more satisfied than the rest. And it's at the top, yeah. Yeah. Olathe used to be really happy with their stormwater ratings until we did point out they were the highest part in Johnson County, and from then they went down. So, and then public transportation, you can see, is a little bit mixed. Some areas are better than others, but you'll be able to drill down in the report and actually see how people in different neighborhoods rate the different services. You'll also be able to see how different groups have needs and desires for different services as well. And I'll talk to you at the end a little bit about it, the dashboard that we've developed for you to do that. So any questions about the neighborhood services? I'm going to shift to county services next, and obviously, if they come up in, we'll have some more time to talk. So I'll go on into county services. Here you've got everything from the election office, your parks. I won't read the whole list to you. Works your way down to the attorney's office and senior transportation services. You'll notice here a lot more folks, particularly for the ones that are on the bottom half, there's more they're okay. And I will tell you that ratings or services that get a rating of 3 are the ones that can be most influenced by communication. And so a number of communities use communication strategies just to tell their residents about what they're doing. For example, I think senior transportation, they must be okay. I haven't used them myself personally. I haven't had a bad experience. You know, a few people have the 18%, and then you'll see 30% feel good about it, but you got 53% that frankly just probably see it, they hear it, and they know it's okay. If they were suddenly to hear information about you having the greatest senior transportation services out there, or they heard testimonials about it, the 53% can suddenly become shifted to the positives. On the other hand, it can also shift negatively. So it's one of those things where when you have a lot of people giving you a rating of 3, public information can sway people's attitudes related to satisfaction very quickly. And so that's something to be aware of. And you'll see you have quite a few of the ones, your public health services, the Area Agency on Aging, services for senior developmental disabilities, all of those have 50% or more giving ratings of 3. But when we look at the trends here, unlike the local neighborhood services or city services, are a little bit more mixed. If we look from 2016, 9 of 11 have improved. So you're overall moving in the right direction. You see the election process has made significant gains from 43 to 55% over the last 4 years. A customer service, I think you can be very proud of, because at least the culture of employees being responsive to residents has gone from 37 to 43. And you can see the senior services for people with developmental disabilities went down last time, but has rebounded by 5 percentage points since the last survey. On the other hand, the treasurer's office is still better than it was in 2016, but it decreased a little bit. Motor vehicle registration, you can see, dropped a lot, but I can also tell you it could be related to some of the changes at the state level, because Johnson County does their survey every year, and they had a big drop from 2018 to 2019 after many of those changes took place. And so comparative data suggests that the state changes probably affected you because other counties we've surveyed were affected as well. You'll see the county appraiser's office also decreased a little bit. The biggest decrease was in the county district attorney's office, which was down 6 points. But long-term, 9 out of the 11 have improved. And when we look at the priorities, Motor vehicle registration, I don't know the latest results for Johnson County, but in last year's survey for Johnson County, it was also at the top. So the changes that took place in the state made a service that is important to people jump in both of both of the areas from being a high mid-priority to the top. Yeah.
Question, could the treasurer's, you had an arrow pointing down on the treasurer, could the treasurer have been confused with the motor vehicle registration? Could there have been some overlap there?
It's possible. The way we'd be able to tell that oftentimes if we look at the ownership, like are they a owner or renter? Because your owners tend to have a lot more direct things with the treasurer in lots of cases if they're paying their taxes there versus most everybody who has a car. We can look at those questions too. So we could take a look at it. It may be related. The difference is you'll see the treasurer's office though went down 2 percentage points. It just went down 1% on the motor vehicle, the rotor vehicle had a 6% decrease. The treasurer was just 2. So clearly people are differentiating the two to some extent, but there may be some relationship.
Commissioner McKierney?
And in a related vein, is it possible that the decrease in the ratings of satisfaction for the county appraiser's office were not necessarily related to the service received, but to the valuation notice that was received?
Yeah, that's common. And so some of the best ratings we ever got for appraisal's office were after the market collapsed in 2009. I mean, I'm doing this for 2 decades. The highest ratings I ever saw for appraiser's office were back in 2010, especially in places like Florida and Las Vegas and other places that had just seen the housing boom get out of control. When the housing prices plummeted, the appraiser's office ratings went up. So there's I don't want to dismiss that, so that's one of the reasons you're doing the survey regularly, is over time, if you keep doing this a few more times, you'll be able to see, well, what were valuations of homes and how did that change compared to the rating? And eventually, you can come up even with predictive models. That's one of the things that we're working on, so that as the climate changes, how does that influence people's satisfaction with services? Because there certainly is some influence by the climate. We know that, for example, Oklahoma City got their best ratings ever when the Thunder were in the national NBA championship. And so we don't know how much impact, the Chiefs won the Super Bowl after we did your survey, so it didn't have a chance, but people may feel good. Things like that can have a positive impact. And we're actually, as a company, trying to develop ways to assess that influence. We just haven't figured it all out yet. So as far as the top priorities here, you'll see motor vehicles at the top. Then there's a lot that are just really almost the same. In some ways, that's the nature of county services, is they're used by segments of the population, and some of those segments tend to gravitate to those needs. But you'll see statistically from the district attorney's office at 21% on up to the customer service, there's only a range of 7% in the percentage that are picking it as a top priority. And even though the district attorney's office is far down the list when you look at the top 4, it's actually second when you just look at the first choice. So keeping all that in mind as you move forward makes this a little bit more difficult to say, hey, here's what we need to focus on outside the motor vehicle registration, but I can tell you the state changes did have some influence on that. When you look at it by district, you'll notice that motor vehicle registration was the tops in all 8 districts. When you then come to the number 2 through 5th issue, you'll see it's kind of a little bit all over the board. And some of this, you'll take a look, for example, customer service is number 2 in districts 2, 4, and 8. You'll see the district's attorney office in District 5, county parks in 6, area agency on aging in 7, 3, and 1. And so you'll see the cluster of services that are in the top 5 are very similar if you just say, is the issue in the top 5, but outside of motor vehicle registration, there is a number of things that vary. And so I know that creates more challenges because now you have to figure out, well, what's going to be the county priority, given that you have some differences. But remember, there were 11 other services on, so the top 5 tend to be pretty consistent among all the districts. It's just the difference between being the first through the 5th. When we look at the analysis, you'll see the same thing again from here on out. Unfortunately, if you are right-brained and you like the little quadrant, I don't have any more of those, but you'll see motor vehicle registration is at the top, and then you'll see there's a cluster of 5 other services that are almost statistically equal when you look at the important satisfaction rating between 0.15 and 0.17. So you have your aging services, your county appraiser's offices, the developmental disability services, senior transportation, but I want to highlight customer service oftentimes transcends all of your departments. And so that's something that is highly valued by your residents. In fact, when you come over here and look at the most important rank, customer service was 2. And so that's one of the things I look at these surveys and I say, well, how can you have a positive impact on residents by, I think one of the ways you can do it is just reinforcing a culture that's excellent when it comes to the way you take care of your customers. They're going to see that. They expect a lot of it. It's an important thing to them. So just being treated well, being treated responsibly, those kind of things I think are low-cost ways to cause residents to feel better about county-level services moving forward without the costs of what some of these other services would potentially take to make better. When you look at the maps, you'll see the motor vehicle registration. Again, I'm showing these just to show similarities across the county. The area agency and aging services, similar throughout the county appraiser's office. So there weren't some places that rated it better. So you might say, well, were certain districts, because of maybe the housing style, did they feel differently based on appreciation levels than others? Well, when you look at the district level maps, that wasn't the case. However, if you look within your districts, you can see some differences. And so that could go back to your question, if you find some areas where the housing prices have really appreciated and you see they're in orange or red, that would be consistent with that having a negative impact. But if you find some places where the housing prices have really appreciated and they're blue, probably not the factor causing the change. And you also see developmental disabilities, customer service, and senior transportation. So I didn't bring these to bore you, but what stood out to me as I do a lot of these surveys, it's very rare to see so much consistency within elected jurisdictions like we are here for the top priorities. Typically, you'll at least see some color variation, maybe by one shade, but as many issues as I know you all deal with, there's tremendous consistency in the way people perceive services being delivered, and for the most part, how they prioritize them throughout the county. But what happens is a lot of times the argument comes down to the first versus the fourth, and even though there's 11 services, it's getting to figure out, well, which one do you put slightly more resources in given limited constraints on your budget? But that's why I go back to this piece here. I think an emphasis on customer service is the low-hanging fruit out of this survey, given that it was the second most important service among the county services that were assessed. That's something that isn't going to cost the money like some of these others potentially could cost to dramatically improve the quality of service you provide. Any questions on that? That's the county level.
Commissioners, Commissioner Bynum?
I just have a comment, I think, more for the governing body and the staff. When you look at motor vehicle registration and the ratings on that, you know, sitting at the top of the list across all districts, it seems almost unfair to even have the motor vehicle question on the survey, because that is a state mandated function being carried out by mandate in a county building. Those fees are paid and shipped off to Topeka. Motor vehicle registration fees, they don't stay here. And everything we do to register a motor vehicle is because the state government told us that's how we're going to do it. And I think that our treasurer and that motor vehicle staff have done everything they know to do to make that process as least painful and complicated as they possibly can, you know, such as getting in line online so that you don't even have to go to the building until it's 10 minutes away from the time they're going to call your number. It almost seems unfair to year over year subject them to findings like this when our staff has done everything humanly possible to mitigate the pain of visiting that office. And like I said, the things they are doing there, same with the appraiser, are being mandated by state statute. So Just an opinion, and I think something for us to contemplate.
And I'd say, having done this a lot, in some sense, it's the reality, though, because what happens is your residents' perceptions of the county are being influenced by those services. And so even though you may be controlled, one of the reasons for doing a tool like this is so you actually know. It's better to know that what's happening, and that can allow your lobbyists and your folks to work with the state to perhaps change things. And so that's what a number of our clients use, is when they see the influence the state has on the local situation, oftentimes that's a reason that the people you send to Topeka can use this data too. So it isn't limited to using it just here in Wyandotte County. So, but that, I agree, your comment there, but the tool helps you understand that at the end of the day, when it comes to county level services, motor vehicle services are perceived at the top of the list. And so ultimately people are judging you, even whether or not you control it. But it's better for you to know that than not, so.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? I have one. I want to follow up with Commissioner Bynum's question. It could be the location and accessibility of those offices that could come into play, hours of operation. I do believe that our staff, local staff, has done an outstanding job to help with some of the issues that the state put on them. But also, is there consideration that the higher personal property taxes on the vehicles might be playing into this?
All of those, and that's why I'll be working with Mr. Grimm and others of your staff to help train you to use your dashboard, because this is where the dashboard can become a super tool, because then you can start drilling down, are there differences based on income? Are there differences based on where people live? Are there differences based on whatever the variable might be? So that way, at the end of the day, you can start to assess what might the contributing factors be. Because when you look across the county at the district level, there really aren't any differences. But if it is related to location, you may see that within each district where the places are, get better ratings than the ones that aren't. And we don't know that at this level, but because you have such a substantial database, you'll be able to do some analysis on this issue that most communities would not be able to. And I'll be happy to help you all do that, because it would be great for you to better understand that so you can make some decisions in the future. Any other questions on the county level services? All right, now I'm going to shift to the next topic, which is our public safety ratings. And you'll see in public safety, 5 of the 9 areas have seen improvements since 2016. Most of the changes were not significant, but interestingly, the efforts to prevent crime, you see, have rebounded a couple percent. Visibility of code enforcement in neighborhoods has also rebounded. On the other hand, we saw slight decreases in the visibility of police in neighborhoods and how quickly a police department responds to emergencies. Those 2 areas have gone down a little bit. But for the most part, the ratings are pretty much about the same. They've been one of your higher areas. They're very important to folks, but we haven't seen really any radical changes in the ratings for any of the categories that were assessed. In fact, you'll look down there and you'll see within about 1 or 2% for the last couple surveys, they've been the same levels. When we look at the things that are most important, what is really good about this year's finding is that what's most important to folks, you'll see at the top, efforts to prevent crime. What's second most is visibility in police and neighborhoods. What was interesting about this survey is prevents the crime went up, neighborhoods went down about the same amount. So, but all in all, I think things balance out. But those are the things. So people are caring about crime where they live and making sure they know that the unified government's doing things to keep them safe. And so anytime I see efforts to prevent crime at the top of the list, it's oftentimes influenced as much by what people hear as what the statistics are. In a number of communities, I've seen concerns about crime go up when the statistics for crime actually go down. Sometimes they go in the reverse, but making sure you keep people informed about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how resources are being used can have a real big impact on affecting people's perceptions of crime prevention. That you'll see as you work your way down, the fire department's response to emergency medical calls and how quickly the fire department responds. It doesn't mean that these people don't care about them, but you're doing well in those areas, and comparatively, the items related to crime and police visibility tend to be things that people think are more important right now in the short term. And when we did the analysis, you'll see that those are the top two items. So in other words, if the goal is to enhance overall satisfaction with public safety services, doing what you can to improve your communications about keeping people safe, what you're doing to prevent crime, and to the extent that you can let people know about the visibility in neighborhoods. I know Overland Park a few years ago had pulled back their police patrols from neighborhoods to put them on arterials so they could increase their response time. That actually helped prevent crime. Problem was, neighbors had become used to seeing the patrols, and when they didn't, some neighbors felt less safe because they thought, oh, if I see a police car drive through every once in a while, that must prevent crime. And so they needed to do an education effort just to let people know that some of the changes they'd done in the way they were deploying their local police officers was actually making people safer, and then that helped them rebound after they had initially seen a decrease. Overall safety was still high, but people's perceptions had been influenced just by a change in the way police officers were deployed. And you can see that's important here. And you also see visibility of code enforcement officers in neighborhoods and animal control. Those are two other issues that are perhaps a little bit lower on the code enforcement piece. You might remember earlier on, overall was one of the relatively high priorities or opportunities for improvement. And so those are things that you can work on as well. When it comes to efforts to prevent crime, you see, again, similar ratings throughout the district, or throughout the county by district. Visibility of police in neighborhoods is a little bit better in a couple of the districts than the rest of the county. When it comes to visibility of code enforcement in neighborhoods is pretty much the same. Same thing when it comes to overall quality of animal control in neighborhoods. So again, most of the area, when I first put the presentation together, I thought, wow, they're going to get bored of all these yellow maps. But I know. So then I pulled out your district level maps. There's lots of color in your districts. And the reason I wanted to do that, though, is to have you recognize that you represent very diverse districts. Even though you all, a lot of times you say, I'm District 1, within your districts, there's a lot of diversity. And a lot of times the differences that you may think from your perception could be influenced by the folks within your district to whom you're connected. Because when you actually look at your district overall compared to the other districts, they're much more similar than you might think than probably when you get to public meetings or you're having discussions about what the top priorities are. And some of that could even be influenced just by whom you're working with in your own districts, more so than necessarily your district being that much different than the rest of the county. So maintenance is our next category, and this, you remember, street maintenance is 41% dissatisfaction, so this is certainly the high-cost area for improvement. You'll notice compared to 2016, though, you're moving in the right direction. 11 of 13 areas have improved. Snow removal is the one area that we actually saw some of the decreases. A couple years ago, I think we did not have a whole lot of snow. I'm not sure how this year. That's true. There you go. Yeah, that's exactly. So, thank you. I was like, we had a different time of year. Yeah, so this is probably influencing that more than anything. And then you'll see maintenance of streets and neighborhoods is down a little bit. It's up from 2016. But the good news is maintenance of alleys, maintenance of sidewalks, maintenance of curbs, and your overall ratings for stormwater drainage, those have all up significantly just from 2 years ago. So all in all, you're moving in the right direction slowly. This is a difficult area to move the needle forward, but it's generally moving forward, and we have a good explanation now on snow. I had overlooked that. As far as the top priorities, neighborhood street maintenance is actually at the top. And so this is a different issue for you than a number of other communities where I work, where oftentimes it's the major streets that people are focused on. And you'll see that's still important. It's third at 31%, but actually neighborhood streets are the thing that actually people place even more important. So they're both important, but you have 4 out of 10 or almost 5 out of 10 picking neighborhood streets compared to just 3 out of 10 picking their major streets as their top priorities. And again, snow removal's in that list too, but I want to bring your eyes down to the 4th item on the list, because I'm always trying to look for low-hanging fruit that doesn't cost you $3 billion. Come down there, you'll see cleanliness of streets and other public areas. 23%, though it is significantly less than 31, the cost for doing that's a whole lot less than redoing all your street maintenance. And so that's one of the things I'd have you take a look at. When we looked at the analysis, you'll see neighborhood streets and snow removal, those were at the top. But this is where you'll see overall cleanliness is actually in that second tier of categories as an opportunity for improvement. And so if you're actually looking at dollar for dollar, that's something that I think you should perhaps consider, because that'll have a very positive impact on your residents' perception of how you're caring for the maintenance just by making things look cleaner and taking care of them. Above that, you see it's sidewalks, streets, snow removal, and more streets. Those things cost a lot. But one of the things you may be able to do to show your residents that you really are concerned about taking care of the maintenance of the community is doing things that will make it look better. Because then after that, you have more curbs and you have stormwater drainage. So every one of these things is lots of dollars outside of that one. When we look at the charts here, you'll see quite a bit of variation in your neighborhood maps, especially when it comes to streets and neighborhoods, and a lot of it has to do with the age. Some of your newer subdivisions are dark blue, other ones are dark red. So you'll see maintenance of streets and neighborhoods is generally about the same. When we look at snow removal on streets and neighborhoods, at least the level of service is comparable across the county. Same thing when it comes to sidewalks and neighborhoods. And your maintenance of your city streets, and then also cleanliness. So again, not to show you the same chart over and over again, but one of the themes I wanted to share tonight is how much similarity there is at the district level when you look at yourselves district by district. It's really within your districts where I see the most variation. And when you pull out, if you haven't gotten your own district reports, you're going to see a lot of color at your district level. Yeah, some of you are already looking at them. So any questions on the maintenance side? So again, I want to emphasize on maintenance, you know the streets are an issue, but the opportunity to enhance your ratings in that area overall, I think could come by just cleaning things up and giving people the appearance that public areas are better cared for by being cleaner.
Commissioner Bynum.
So the survey results on this section tell me that the priorities are streets, streets, and streets.
Yes.
In that order.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And then you can see,
So, again, my question comes more to the governing body and the staff, because as we work in priority-based budgeting, how are we folding in the top 3 issues that our community says need attention? How will we do that moving forward? I guess it's a rhetorical question for the moment, Doug. We'll put you on the spot later.
anything else? Otherwise, I'll go on with Parks and Recreation is next. Parks and Recreation has seen improvements or maintained the same ratings in 10 of the 12 areas. No areas have decreased significantly over the last 2 years. You'll notice that the number of parks, the perception's up 6% compared to 2016. Your walking and biking trails rebounded after dropping last time. Ease of registering has gone up 4 percentage points, so whatever you're doing to make it easier for folks. Your fee or perception of value has gone up significantly. Skateboard parks, your programs for seniors and adult recreation also rebounded a little. There's still opportunities to do better here. So whenever you're looking at these, the overall direction is moving in the right direction, but certainly you can see those numbers go higher by focusing on them in the future. The top priorities are essentially the number of walking and biking trails you have, and then maintenance of parks and equipment. But I'll emphasize that when it comes to maintenance of parks and equipment, it actually had more people pick it as a top choice than any of the top 2 choices outside of walking and biking trails. So definitely this idea of maintaining what you have. I think when you see the theme of street maintenance, you see the cleanliness, and now you see maintaining what you already have park-wise. That's a kind of a consistent theme that we see in the survey. And sometimes it's easy to run out and build the next big thing, but the results of the survey, in many ways, say take care of what you already have and make what you have better. You'll see swimming pools kind of round out the top 3, and then community centers and youth and recreation were the top 5. And when we looked at it overall, your walking and biking trails continue to be the park's feature. that people are paying the most attention to. It's the number one priority. It's only 6th, though, on the satisfaction, so there are some opportunities to do better. But if you bring your eyes down, you're doing a pretty good job of taking care of your parks and equipment at 30%, but I can tell you comparatively, that's a number that could be a lot higher, and it's clearly the number one choice. So compared to everything else, you're doing okay in maintaining your parks and equipment. It's the highest rated area, but 49% satisfaction could be 55, 60%, and I think that would gain a lot of traction or help you gain traction with regard to how satisfied people are with parks overall. So again, taking care of your parks, your swimming and spray pools, and then you can see youth recreation programs is another opportunity, the programming ideas versus some of the things that are going to require significant capital investment. That's actually 3rd, and if you look among your households with children, it's actually at the very top. So that's one of those things. So you've got to remember, this is all respondents. But when it comes to youth recreation programs, it's particularly important among your families that have kids who are either young or in their teenage years. And then you can see the last tier, community centers, programs for seniors, and adult recreation programs. Again, if we look county-wide, the perception of walking and biking trails is pretty similar across the county. Same thing for your spray pools and spray parks, youth recreation programs, and then you'll see the one area where we do see perhaps the most difference on the survey is maintenance of parks and equipment. You can see down the south half minus the corner tends to rate that a little bit better than the northern half of the county. So, any questions on parks before we go to the last major topic, and then I'll give you a few other findings? All right. Any question? Code enforcement. Hats off here. I saved some of the best improvements for last. Great job in your code enforcement. So I didn't want to lead with this. Yeah. And it's not just a number, it's the magnitude of the changes. You might remember some of the previous charts, you got a blue arrow with a 2 or a 3 or a 4% increase on code enforcement, and it isn't just this last period. It's a continuation from what goes back to 2016. So just take a look at it. Cleanup of junk, trash, and debris has gone from 31 to 42%. Just tremendous. Maintenance of residential property from 33 to 42%. Removal of inoperable junk cars, 35 to 41. Mowing and trimming of weeds has gone from 28 to 40. Proportionally, a tremendous change. You'll see maintenance of commercial properties gone from 33 to 38. Mowing and trimming on private or vacant property citywide from 24 to 33. And then the cleanup of junk, trash, and debris citywide from 26 to 32. So just tremendous, and it's been most observed. You'll see on the neighborhood one, some of these we had citywide. We differentiated whether it was where you live in your neighborhood versus just across the whole community. And so you've hit a home run. So what you've been doing on code enforcement, great job. Yeah, so, and I'll tell you, I know I've worked with some other folks here and a lot of folks around the country. Code enforcement is a hard one to tackle. You know, that's one where communities really struggle oftentimes figuring out what should be done. Should we do more? Should we do less? A lot of folks are afraid to do more because people then complain and get citations. But what people forget a lot of times is that most people aren't breaking the rules. And so a lot of times when you do start to enforce, everybody around that starts to see the benefits. But whatever you're doing, and I don't know what it is, it's definitely among the best that I've seen in the last couple of years in the country. So when it comes to the top priorities, the cleanup of junk, trash, and debris citywide is clearly at the top. Almost as many people picked it as their top choice as any of the other things, so continue doing that. You're moving in the right direction. It's also consistent with the maintenance where cleanup was a big deal on the maintenance side. So again, a takeaway from this survey that isn't billions of dollars is focusing on how can we keep the community clean and even work with others to take care of making sure the community's cleaned up. I think that'll resonate strongly. You'll see mowing was second, and then cleanup of junk in neighborhoods was third. And so you've seen the biggest improvement there in the neighborhoods. You know, that was at the top for cleaning up the junk. If you work your way down, we've seen some improvement citywide, but interestingly, the emphasis is more the citywide than neighborhoods. They impact, obviously they go hand in hand, but that probably is more likely to be some of your more public, commercial places that are outside where people are living, which could be some of the emphasis. And again, needing to drill down in the data to figure out who responded, how they did, where they lived, and why will give us some better indications moving forward. And when we did the analysis, again, number one is cleanup of junk debris, junk, trash, and debris citywide. The second is mowing and trimming, and frankly, doing the same thing in neighborhoods. And so taking away from the survey, I think that's moving forward if the county emphasizes cleanup, cleanliness, those sorts of things. It will have a real positive impact on how residents view the direction you're headed. And particularly, just one more time, code enforcement, great job. I don't know who's leading that, but I mean, you are, there you go. So I mean, yeah. So, yeah. Sometimes people lose sight of giving comment. Sometimes you do a survey like this and you go by all the results. I just have to stop and say, this is not normal. This is incredible. So to see, yeah, right. Yeah. Double-digit improvements in such a short period of time, and they're sustained. I've seen some communities do it like one time, but they don't sustain it for 4 years, and they don't see the same kind of improvement stair step. That's why it stands out to me. I've seen a community run out and do it for 2 years, and then come back 4 years, and they're right back where they were before. So you're really doing something special here, so.
Chris, I just want to state for the record, the important part is that we identified the issues that are the top priorities before this came out, and our 2020 objectives are to hit these top 3 things.
That's awesome. That's great. So, yeah, and that just shows that you're in touch with the residents' thing. So, again, when you look at the maps, the cleanup of junk, mowing and trimming, we're all the same district-wide. Yeah, I did. So, anyway. So that was the really positive takeaway. A few other things, and then I'll wrap it up if there's more questions. How people get information. This is what I was highlighting up front. Social media is becoming a thing in a big way. Yeah, for you'll notice that when people ask how they get information about the unified government, 39%, 4 out of 10 folks identified that. The Nextdoor app is one of the most rapidly, it's been around a long time, but it has just started to take off in the last couple years, and you'll see that's now 25%. So being able to manage and be involved in those social media channels will give the county a great deal of leverage to influence and provide the information that people need. You'll also become the trusted source, because what happens when social media is dominating, it's like, can I trust it? And then it's like, well, are they my friend, or where did it come from? But that's where local governments tend to be trusted, especially if you're getting the kind of rating. I won't say every local government I survey, some clearly are not, but you're not in that. People do look at the unified government as a good source of information. You'll see your citizen newsletters right behind local television, but really that means that you can influence it. Yeah, and your website you'll see is the 4th. So those are some areas that you really can influence. And that's why when I go back to those early slides, when I showed you those big chunks of people giving ratings of 3, with information, you can influence that person who says, well, I think it's okay, to suddenly say, oh, I saw about what we're doing in that area, and now they give you a 4. And as people move to 4s, they move to 5s, and as you build that confidence, that can really build the kind of community that ultimately you need to help support funding and big dollar investments. That's one of the challenges sometimes, getting people just to approve more funding for things, because they're not sure if it's really necessary. But when they have a lot of confidence in their local government and you put those proposals out there, they're much more likely to support them. Other thing that we looked at were just the problems that people are experiencing in their neighborhoods. You see the 3 that people reported having as major problems or experiencing the most: crime, drugs, and loose animals. It's the same both at the top and the bottom. I wanted to highlight, though, that homelessness, though it's at the bottom of the list, 1 in 6 residents is reporting that it's a problem in their neighborhood. That's a lot. That's a high percentage. And so that's one of the things. So sometimes people just look at the top to the bottom. One of my reasons I come here is to point out sometimes when things are at the bottom, but they're a big deal. And so when 1 in 6, and if you add the 18 and the 24%, you have over 1 in 3 households, almost 4 in 10, are reporting that homelessness is at least somewhat of a problem where they live. And you'll notice then when you look at some of your maps where it's more concentrated in some places than others. But that's certainly something to keep in mind. And this is something that will help you drill down, particularly as you use some of the dashboards. Some of the other things we asked was how important you think it is for the unified government to manage stormwater runoff. And yeah, so People think that's important, only 5%. But what will happen is the 5% will all show up together some night, and it will sound like that everybody doesn't think this is important. But there we go. So for every person that complains, remember that there's 10 times as many people that think it's very important for each person that tells you it's not important. So every phone call, every person you run into that says, why are we doing this? Don't think it's important. Remember, 10 times. And if you actually then add the importance to that, it's 83 to 5. So tremendous ratio in support of this. The other thing is we asked people about how they thought stormwater fees should be paid. You know, a lot of folks just don't know. That's the 30% down there. But when it comes to whether it should all be the same or paid by the people who basically generate more, it's 57 to 13. So people definitely lead to people who produce it, should pay more for that. When it comes to support for an additional sales tax for Parks and Recreation, you can see that's pretty mixed. I wouldn't run out tomorrow and do this. If you got 37% who are saying they're not supportive now, you'll see that that's, you add the, it's almost equal with non-support. But my experience in local politics are very different than just these surveys. But if you want to run out to the election, you don't want the not supportive to already be 3 times the very supportive when you're starting. And that doesn't mean you can't do something in the future, but right now this probably isn't a great time to do that. And then the last couple of things is support for residency policy for Wyandotte County employees. You can see it's about a 2-to-1 ratio of the very supportive at 51%. To 25% are not supportive. So leans supportive for that. And then coming about the unified government policy of property owners maintaining the right of way, people are very supportive, 55% to just 9% non-supportive. So again, a 6-to-1 ratio of people who are strong advocates or strongly opinionated.
Wow. Commissioner Bynum.
I'm curious if you can tell us what question 28A is. What was the question?
Do you have a survey? Yeah, we can actually read it to you. And
I only say that because that is shocking. That's a
it
shocking.
doesn't shock me.
Okay.
Just from doing a lot of surveys over the years. If you have a history in a community where property owners have historically taken care of it, that's something that isn't that unusual. But we can read the
Commissioner
full.
Kane?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez. I wholeheartedly disagree with this. And y'all know how much trouble we've had, Mr. Buck, sir, and how we, at least in District 5, I don't believe this chart. Every other chart you got, I think is fantastic. I think you guys did a really good job. So you only failed on one that I can see.
And I'll just respond. They're actually
You don't want to really respond.
Yeah. I will tell you that we did provide some information to context this, so that does influence people's.
I'm just telling you, in my district, that is way off.
Yeah.
And I think we're getting better. I think Jeff and those guys have done a really good job of getting that. But I don't know if the question was worded properly, or maybe we should have taken it down some of the roads that are narrow out in my district. Hollingsworth, a couple of gravel roads that we have out there, some of the one-way roads that we have out there. So, but I do thank you for your work.
No. And I'll just let you know is the question contained rationale for doing this. And so what this would suggest is your response may be for people who haven't been told the background. Because this is a question that basically said the goal of this change is to improve the appearance. And so it gave people the rationale, which goes back to the importance of communication. And so this is an informed response based on details that were provided. So if without the details and you just hear people talk about it, chances are they're going to be more opposed to it. The good news about this is we then have an open-ended question here that probably has thousands of responses that I'll let you all digest in quite detail, because we did ask a follow-up for everybody who isn't supportive of this, why not? So that will help you better understand. So
In the spring, I will gladly take you down there to little old ladies that drove me up and down a block for an hour, that are 75, 80 years old, and they raised more hell than my mom did. So like I said, I think you guys did a really good job, except this missed the mark in my district.
And I'll tell you that
not giving up yet, brother.
Folks.
You know, if I were you, I'd give up.
So, there you go. Anyway, here's the summary, because there's some great stuff here. So, bottom line is, of the 66 areas that you've assessed since 2016, you've seen increases in 53 of them. So you're definitely moving in the right direction overall. Some of the most notable increases, I highlighted your code enforcement improvements, communication, fire, parks and recreation facilities, and programming, planning and zoning. Frankly, there's just a lot of things on that list. So you're definitely moving in the right direction. And again, hats off to the code enforcement improvements. The only areas that have decreased are the snow removal, which we already talked about the reason for that. The city attorney's office is down, and then motor.
Typo.
What's that?
City attorneys.
Yeah, so county attorney, thank you. Yeah, there we go. We did catch that. Thanks for catching me here. Last thing is the opportunities for improvement. Some of these are high dollars, others are not. I think the appearance piece, which we see filtering through the code enforcement and your maintenance, are one of the things to continue emphasizing. And obviously, the larger issues related to stormwater and your street maintenance is clearly at the top of the list of taking care of your streets. And then at the county level, motor vehicle registration may be influenced a lot by the state, but it's something that influences people's perceptions of the county, and it's important for you to be aware of that. And then you can see a number of the other things, but the customer service is the takeaway I really want to highlight for the county level services, is that really transcends all your county services, and it was second most important to your residents and one of your top opportunities for improvement when it comes to improving perceptions of the county level. So with that, there is a lot of information here. 4,300 and some odd residents took the time to take this survey. That's a huge sample given your population. That's a huge sample for a national survey. So really what the challenge is trying to equip you, county staff, and others to use this as a tool for decision-making. And just because the survey says something doesn't always mean that's how it really is. And that's one of the reasons I always go back to, this informs you to how people generally think, but communication can influence that, because oftentimes you'll have information that the average resident does not. But this allows you to incorporate their thoughts, priorities into all the other decision-making processes that you'll do. So with that, I don't know if anyone has any other questions. I know we've taken a little time during the presentation to answer them, but I'd be happy to take on some more if there are.
Any questions from the commissioners? Commissioner McKiernan?
I don't have a question, just several comments. First of all, I will not be Eeyore. But second of all, I want to thank you and your company for so consistently doing great work and summarizing it in a way that can be meaningful for us to act on. I want to thank my fellow commissioners. When we requested that this be resumed after an absence of, I believe, 11 years, the commission said, yes, let's do it. And they had enough foresight to see that there will be value if we start doing it now and continue to do it over time. And so I'd like to thank my fellow commissioners for, first of all, agreeing to do it, second of all, agreeing to fund it at the level where we can get neighborhood-level detail. And I think that'll be important for all of us to go back now. And I think that the results of this survey this year do indicate that when we put our mind to making improvements, and I would look at the area of code enforcement and blight reduction, when we put our mind to making improvements, it is possible to do it with a concerted effort. I think our big challenge as a commission is going to be, as Commissioner Bynum brought up a moment ago, to weave this into the priority-based budgeting process and to make sure that we are funding those things that are the most important to our citizens in a way that reflects that importance. So thank you again for what you do. It's great work every time.
Any other comments or questions? I would just like to state that I think as we get into our priority-based budgeting, these are going to be a great guide in assisting us in what we should look at and where we think we can make some improvements and have better stewardships of our dollars. I want to commend all of my fellow commissioners for the work they've done in the past. I know this is the first time I've sat through one of these, and it is kind of exciting to see some of the progress we've made, because I think at times we listen to those that are the naysayers, the ones that have the loudest microphone versus those that are really content. And I think the neutral colors all across the county show that we're all in this together. I do know I have one special announcement, that I'm to understand that Melissa Sieben has a guest here this evening, Orion Schuer, and I hope I pronounced that correct. Yeah, that's correct. Well, welcome. It's great to have you not only in Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas, but to have you here this evening. Thank you for being here. And I believe Mr. Kane had a question.
Just a question. On March 25th, we're having 3-ons for a fire station.
Okay.
All right, and I thought, years ago, when we hired an outside firm to come in and sit down with the union management to kind of come up with a game plan, I thought that was about this. So is that group going to be involved with these 3-ons?
No, they're not. This is really our plan that we've talked to you over sometime about how we're going through and showing what stations, would be the next ones in line for capital projects. So it looks at, how we're coming out with 12s, how we're handling that. Then we'll come to, how we've talked about working down on the station down in the Turner area, and how we can work to pull in companies into that area. So
Okay.
we're talking about those station repairs and how they fall into line.
Okay, so, and then we're going to come here and talk about that at special session when we get done with, yeah.
We'll have a
okay.
follow-up, I believe, a special
And then
session later.
I think we should have a special session on how we plan to man Station 12.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
we're planning that.
I mean, it's just a kind of combination of things, but
Yes.
I just want to make sure that when we get done with that,
We're-
we share with the public what's going on, because I've already been asked about the.
I think Mayor was looking at probably April for a
Okay, cool.
special
That'd be-
session for
That'd be
one of
great.
those.
Thank you. Once again, I just want to say that this was some very, very good information, just great accomplishments, but yet we still have some challenges, and we look forward to having a chance as a collective body to work through those. So if there's any other questions, Mr. Bach, any comments you want to make?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Well, with that was for information only. I believe that, thank you for the presentation. With that concludes our special session. We will convene at 7 o'clock at the Commission Chambers for our Planning and Zoning and regular Commission meeting.